It started with the blanket. That ridiculous, oversized, sunflower-patterned fleece throw she used to drape over the couch like it was some precious heirloom from her grandmother, even though I'm the one who bought it for her at Target 2 years ago. She used to wrap herself in it during movie nights, legs tucked under, wine glass in hand, pretending to shiver so I'd press against her. After the separation, I packed it into one of the boxes she left behind and tossed it in the attic. I hadn't seen it since. But there it was, spread neatly across the arm of the sofa in the guest room, her old room, now supposedly mine, even though we both knew the house belonged to me. It wasn't folded the way I would have done it, either. It had that careless drape she used to do, the kind that said this is mine. She wasn't home at the time. Said she was out grocery shopping, getting ingredients for that pasta she used to make with too much lemon zest. We'd only been rebuilding things for 3 weeks. After a year apart, she came back with the kind of tears that looked rehearsed, the kind of apologies that hit every note perfectly. I acted skeptical, cautious, distant. Let her believe she was slowly earning back trust. She said she missed her old life, missed me, missed us. I told her I needed time. She offered to move into the guest room until I was ready. I let her. But the blanket, her damn blanket, was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it spoke louder than any lie she ever told me to my face. I stared at it for a long time, my hand hovering over the fabric but never touching it. Something about the way it lay there, claiming space that wasn't hers to claim, made my stomach twist in that slow, deliberate way that signals something deeper than suspicion. I didn't get angry. I just stood there, silent, letting the details form a mosaic in my head. I started noticing other things I'd overlooked. The faintest trace of perfume on the bathroom towel, a scent I hadn't smelled since before the split. Her nail clippers on the sink, she never used to leave them out. The hand soap replaced with the brand she preferred. The kind that made my skin dry, but that she said smelled expensive. Each detail, taken alone, was nothing. Together, they formed a pattern. Not a loud one. A quiet pattern. The kind that whispers before it screams. When she returned, I was in the kitchen pretending to scroll through my phone. She walked in humming, fucking humming, carrying 2 bags of groceries and smiling like she had just stepped out of a pharmaceutical commercial. She kissed my cheek and said, "You'll love what I'm making tonight." I nodded and asked her how the store was. She mentioned something about a guy who wouldn't stop blocking the aisle with his cart. Normal. Mundane. But I was listening for the lie beneath her words, and I heard it, not in what she said, but in how quickly she said it. Too rehearsed. Too smooth. Like she'd already had the conversation in her head on the way home. Later that night, after she went to bed in the guest room, I checked her phone. She never used to leave it unattended, but lately, she'd been oddly careless. Or maybe she wanted me to see something to prove she was trustworthy. That backfired. I didn't find any messages. No calls. Nothing suspicious. But I found a deleted photo in her, recently deleted, folder. She must have forgotten that trash takes 30 days to clear. It was a mirror selfie, clearly taken in this house. The angle showed the hallway behind her, and in that hallway, just barely visible, were 2 wine glasses on the entry table, something I never do. I never leave glasses out. And the timestamp? Last Friday. The night she said she was visiting her sister in Trenton. I sat on the edge of my bed, the photo still glowing on her screen. I felt a tightness in my chest, not from heartbreak or fury, just the slow burn of clarity. She never stopped. She didn't come back because she missed me. She came back because her other life started to fall apart. Maybe the guy she cheated with dumped her. Maybe her friends got tired of the drama. Maybe she just wanted the security again. But it wasn't about love. It was about shelter. Familiarity. A fallback plan. Me. She thought she had time. Thought I'd be soft. She was wrong. I went back to bed with a calmness I hadn't felt in months. I turned my face to the pillow, closed my eyes, and started mapping it out, the steps, the timing, the precision it would take. She thought moving back and gave her the upper hand. What she didn't realize was that every piece she thought she controlled had already been flipped. She was living in a stage I built, and soon, she'd see the script wasn't hers to write. There was a strange kind of peace in the early days after she moved back in, the kind that feels too still, like walking into a room where something just happened and no one will say what. She cooked more than she used to, always with that cautious optimism, like she was trying to earn her place back one meal at a time. She'd touch my shoulder lightly when she passed by, give small smiles that didn't quite reach her eyes. I played along. Let her believe the ice was thawing. I let her take over the kitchen again, let her hang her jackets on the hallway hooks, even let her put one of those self-help books on the nightstand in the guest room. I told myself I was observing, watching for cracks. But the truth is, a part of me wanted to believe she was really trying. I wanted the piece to be real. And for a while, it was easy to pretend. Then came the first ripple. She started going to these wellness nights at some local studio. Said they were for rebuilding emotional confidence. She'd leave around 6 and come back around 10, sometimes later. Always with a soft voice and glazed eyes, like someone high on the idea of healing. I asked her about it once, just lightly, and she smiled and said, "It's not about you. It's about me learning to exist without needing approval all the time." The words sounded rehearsed, like something she read in a caption on Instagram. She didn't say it with malice, but there was an edge. A subtle reminder that this version of her had boundaries now, and I wasn't automatically entitled to cross them. She never used to speak like that. Before everything fell apart, we were a team. Now, it felt like she was a solo act who occasionally let me watch from the wings. Her wardrobe changed next. Nothing too obvious. Just sharper choices, boots that clicked louder on the floor, tops that fit a little tighter. I noticed her checking her reflection in the microwave when she passed through the kitchen. She started wearing perfume again, but only when she was going out. Never for me. And her phone, which once used to lie face up on the table or counter, now stayed glued to her hand or screened down when she put it down at all. One night I passed by the guest room on the way to the bathroom and heard her laughing, light, breathy, too genuine to be a podcast. I knocked lightly, and she answered a second later with a casual, "Just watching something funny, eyes too bright, cheeks too flushed." The room smelled like her perfume, fresh, as if she just sprayed it. At 11:30 p.m. There were purchases, 2 Amazon boxes she'd collect before I could get to them. I caught a glimpse once of a receipt on the kitchen counter, half crumpled under a magazine. A $280 charge to a boutique I'd never heard of. When I asked casually what she'd bought, she said, "Just a few things for myself. I haven't treated myself in a while." But I never saw anything new in the closet. Just her usual clothes, nothing special. The bags were gone before I got home from work. One Sunday morning, I got into her car to move it out of the driveway. She'd left it blocking the garbage bins, and I needed to roll them out to the curb. As soon as I opened the door, I smelled cologne. Not mine. The scent was heavy, masculine, and recent. There was an empty coffee cup in the cup holder from a cafe 20 minutes away, one we used to go to when we first started dating. I checked the GPS history. That cafe had been visited 3 times in the past 2 weeks. She never mentioned it. Never brought home anything from there. I put everything back exactly as I found it, made a mental note, and moved the car. Still, I didn't confront her. I told myself there were explanations. Maybe she went with a friend. Maybe she was trying to recreate good memories, find pieces of herself. That's what she'd been saying lately, that she was trying to rediscover herself. She'd talk about growth a lot. Not our growth. Just hers. Words like alignment, inner compass, emotional sovereignty. She made them sound profound, but what I heard was a slow edging away from us. One day, she asked if I could not touch her lower back when I passed by in the hallway. Said it made her feel observed in a way she didn't like. I apologized, stepped back, gave her space. She smiled and said, "Thank you for respecting my boundaries," as if I'd been testing them all along. As if the man who forgave her betrayal was somehow now the one tiptoeing around invisible landmines. Her social media went private next. Nothing dramatic. Just a quiet lock on her profile. No posts tagged with me. No mentions. A clean slate. I didn't follow up. Just watched as her smile online became more frequent, more polished. She looked happy. Free. But it was the kind of freedom that doesn't include the person you're supposedly rebuilding a life with. And yet, every morning she'd pour me coffee, sit across from me at the breakfast table, and ask me about my day. As if none of it were happening. As if I didn't see the way her eyes drifted off mid-conversation, or how her phone would buzz and she'd glance at it with that split-second smile before tucking it away. She hadn't fully slipped away. Not yet. But something was gone, and I knew better than to chase a ghost. It happened on a Wednesday. Midweek, unremarkable, the kind of day that should have just disappeared into routine. She said she was going to an emotional release workshop, one of those therapeutic buzzword nights she'd started attending lately. She wore the same leggings she used for yoga, the same oversized hoodie that made her look small and innocent, like someone just trying to find peace in a broken world. She kissed my cheek on the way out, light as air. I sobbed. I stood there in the doorway, coffee in hand, and watched her walk to the car. It should have ended there, a forgettable moment like any other, but something in me didn't let go of it. Maybe it was the way she barely looked back. Maybe it was the way her hand trembled slightly when she opened the car door, like she was nervous about something, but not because of me. Not fear. Anticipation. I didn't follow her immediately. That would have been too obvious. Too desperate. I waited. Gave it an hour. Enough time for her to get to wherever she said she was going. Enough time for the illusion to feel real. Then I checked the app. Months ago, back when we were rebuilding trust, I installed a location tracker on both our phones under the guise of safety. A precaution, I said, in case something ever happened. She agreed without hesitation. That was the difference between guilt and arrogance. Guilty people hide. Arrogant ones think they'll never get caught. So I opened the tracker and watched the little dot blink on the screen. She wasn't at the studio. Wasn't anywhere near it. She was parked off a frontage road near the edge of town, a good 20 minutes from where she claimed she'd be. I zoomed in. The address didn't pull up a business. Just a string of numbers and a gravel lot that sat behind a shuttered diner and a row of chain-link fencing. There was only one reason to be parked there. One. I didn't drive out there. That wasn't the point. I didn't need to catch her in the act. I didn't need to see his face, or watch them kiss, or hear whatever low, lying voice she used when she wanted someone to feel chosen. All I needed was the silence. The confirmation. The image of her sitting in her car, waiting for someone else. Maybe he pulled up beside her. Maybe he got in. Maybe she laughed. Maybe she cried. Maybe she told him she was scared, but excited. That she hadn't felt like herself in years. That she didn't know how to explain what she was going through. Maybe she used the same words she used with me, wrapped in a new tone to fit the occasion. It didn't matter. Because in that moment, watching her dot on the map, I knew she was no longer mine. Not in a romantic way that had been dead for months. I mean mine in the sense of truth, of respect, of the basic integrity we once owed each other. She had stepped off the stage of redemption and back into the shadows, and she thought I'd never notice. I set the phone down slowly. No tremble in my fingers. No heat rising to my face. Just the soft, clean detachment of someone finally done waiting. I walked to the kitchen, poured the rest of the coffee into the sink, and stared at the drain as it spiraled down. She would come home in a few hours. She would smile. She would act tired, emotionally exhausted from all the healing. She might even ask to talk, to unpack her revelations. She might want to cry on my shoulder, tell me how much growth hurts. And I'd listen. I'd nod. Because now I understood what was happening. Not just the affair. Not just the betrayal. I understood the structure of it. The performance. The role I was meant to play. I wasn't the man being forgiven. I was the set piece, the reliable backdrop she could retreat to when her new world felt unstable. I was the man she could point to and say, "See, I tried." The husband she could lean on when her lover didn't answer his phone. The security blanket with a mortgage and a muted voice. She thought she was winning. Thought she could juggle this balance of old and new, past and future. But she forgot something crucial. I wasn't just watching. I was recording. Every lie, every shift in tone, every excuse that didn't line up. I had timestamps, phone logs, deleted photos, GPS data, all neatly organized. Not to confront her. Not yet. That would be too easy. Too kind. What I was building wasn't a confrontation. It was an ending. One she wouldn't see coming. One that would leave her not just exposed, but hollow. She wanted freedom, growth, space. She would get it in the form of absence. In the form of a void so total, it would feel like a black hole had opened inside her chest and swallowed everything she thought she had rebuilt. And the best part? She'd think it was her fault. Because it was. She would walk through that front door tonight, glowing with false enlightenment, and find me exactly as she left me, quiet, patient, warm. And that would be the last time she'd ever see that version of me again. She thought I was drifting, that her distance had worn me down into some dull version of myself, a man too tired to fight, too fragile to dig. But what she didn't realize was that my silence wasn't surrender, it was surveillance. The night I saw her location parked behind that shuttered diner was the night something in me snapped into focus. I became a machine, running quiet and cold, processing every detail with surgical precision. No emotion, just input and analysis. I started with our shared accounts. She'd once asked for joint credit access again to simplify things, and I'd agreed with a smile. That decision paid off immediately. Every Tuesday and Thursday, there was a $7.29 charge at a gas station across town. Always between 6:45 and 7 p.m. Not near the wellness studio, but close to a cluster of motels, most of them cash only. Too discreet to leave trails, unless you knew where to look. I went to that gas station once, just to see. Bought a bottle of water and stood outside pretending to check my phone. She wasn't there, but a black sedan pulled up 5 minutes later, and a man I didn't recognize stepped out with a gym bag, glanced around like he owed someone an explanation, and walked toward the alley behind the lot. That was enough. I didn't need names yet. I just needed patterns. And she gave them to me freely. Next, I tested her story. She said she was going to a deep presence retreat. One evening, some nonsense phrase that sounded pulled from a wellness podcast. I told her I hoped it helped and kissed her on the cheek. The second she left, I called the studio she claimed to be attending. A young guy answered, chipper, polite. I said I was calling to see if my wife had left her water bottle in the yoga room. Gave her name. Gave the time. He checked. Came back. Nope, sorry man. Don't see her on the list tonight either. Are you sure she signed up? I thanked him, hung up, and stared at the wall for a long moment, absorbing the lie like a sponge absorbs blood, silently, completely. I didn't text her. Didn't mention it when she came back glowing and rebalanced. Just smiled, nodded, asked if she wanted tea. She laughed, touched my hand, and said I was such a grounding presence. I watched her walk past me and imagined how many times she'd said that same line to someone else. The next day, I created a fake Instagram account. Nothing elaborate, just enough posts to look human. A guy with a dog, a few beach pics, and interest in wellness. I followed her closest friend, Jenna, the one she always claimed was her accountability buddy on these spiritual journeys. Jenna accepted the request. I watched her stories, noted the places she tagged. Most of them were restaurants, bars, nowhere near any studio. I waited a few days, then had my fake account reply to one of her yoga-related posts with a flirty but casual comment. She liked it within the hour. The next time my wife said she was going to a women's-only retreat with Jenna, I checked Jenna's stories. She was at a brewery, clinking glasses with a man whose arm she captioned trouble. No retreat. No accountability. Just alcohol and lies. I began asking small, targeted questions. Innocent on the surface, but loaded with traps. I'd say, did you remember to take the highway tonight? There's been a lot of construction near the wellness center. And she'd blink once, hesitate, then say, oh, yeah, actually, I took the back roads to avoid it. Too quick. Too rehearsed. Another time I asked, was Jenna feeling better? You said she was sick last week. My wife nodded slowly, like she was scrolling through internal files. She's better now. We didn't talk much, though. Everyone was quiet during the session. I smiled. Of course. Healing is sacred. She smiled back, relieved. She never noticed I hadn't blinked the entire time. But my favorite move was the burner phone. I picked it up on a lunch break, loaded it with a temporary number, and waited. One night, after she returned from one of her so-called sessions, I left it on the dining table with the screen cracked and a broken charging cable. I made sure it looked abandoned. A relic from some failed tech experiment. She didn't mention it. Didn't touch it. But a day later, I noticed it had been moved slightly, like someone had picked it up and put it down again without meaning to leave evidence. I checked the logs. Someone had tried to open it. No passcode attempts, just a swipe to wake it. The next day, I left a message on that number from a fake contact labeled A. Just 2 words. Same place? I left the phone out again. When I returned home, it was exactly where I left it, but the message had been opened. No reply. No confrontation. Just silence. Like someone trying not to breathe too loudly while reading a page they weren't supposed to see. She still kissed me in the morning. Still poured my coffee. Still asked if I slept well. I answered politely, kept my tone warm. She thought the performance was intact. But by then, I was done collecting. I didn't need more evidence. I wasn't looking for a confession. I was building a moment. A trap with soft edges. One she'd step into willingly, smiling, believing she was safe. Right up until the ground vanished beneath her feet. It happened at a charity fundraiser. One of those forced smile, small plate events full of local politicians and corporate sponsors pretending to care about the community. She convinced me to go, said it would be good to be seen as a couple again. Said she wanted people to know we were rebuilding. She wore a deep green dress I'd never seen before, low in the back, tight around the ribs, elegant and predatory. The kind of thing you don't wear for someone you live with. As she got ready, I sat in the bedroom chair pretending to scroll through my phone. She asked me how she looked, and I told her she looked powerful. She smiled like she didn't know whether to be flattered or afraid. We arrived together, arm in arm, her laugh loud in the lobby. She knew everyone. introduced me to half the room like she was proud to be back on my arm. But I knew the truth. She wanted eyes on her, wanted to be seen, needed the illusion of control. The event was held in the grand ballroom of the Lucerne Hotel downtown. High ceilings, chandeliers, the kind of place where the lighting was designed to make you feel just underdressed. We worked the room. She did most of the talking. I let her. We sat at a table near the center, where the VIPs were placed. I had arranged that, anonymously donated a significant amount to the charity just days prior. It wasn't about the cause. It was about positioning, visibility, timing. She thought the night was about public image. She was half right. Just before the speeches began, I excused myself and made a short detour to the AV booth near the back. I handed a flash drive to the technician and said, just after the director's opening remarks, I'd like to play this short video. It's from a partner who couldn't be here tonight. It's very important. He nodded, didn't ask questions. People rarely do when you wear a tailored suit and speak with authority. I returned to the table and refilled her wine. She looked radiant under the chandelier glow, cheeks flushed, eyes alive. She leaned in close and whispered, "Thank you for coming with me tonight. It means a lot." I smiled. Of course, I wouldn't miss this for the world. The lights dimmed, and the director stepped onto the stage. A few minutes into his well-rehearsed monologue about unity and community support, he gestured toward the screen behind him. And now, a special message from one of our newest benefactors. The ballroom dimmed further. The screen lit up, and there she was, my wife, caught in perfect clarity by a lens she never knew existed. The first shot, her car parked behind that gas station, her silhouette visible through the windshield, leaning towards someone in the passenger seat. Next, a still from a security cam I'd acquired from a neighboring building, showing her stepping into a motel room, hand in hand with a man in a black jacket. Then came the texts, white background, black letters, undeniable. "Can't wait to feel your hands again. He's asleep in the next room, and I'm thinking about your mouth." This weekend. Same spot. The room went dead silent. Forks paused midair. Wine glasses frozen halfway to lips. People stared. Some gasped. Her body tensed beside me like a wire pulled too tight. I didn't look at her. I looked straight ahead, face calm, jaw relaxed. The video faded to black. The screen shut off. Silence reigned for another 5 seconds before the director stumbled back to the microphone, eyes wide, voice cracking. "We apologize for the technical mix-up." Murmurs began to rise, low and anxious, the kind of social panic that builds in rooms with too much glass and not enough escape. She turned to me slowly. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Just a faint exhale, like the wind had been knocked out of her. Then the words came in stages, like the phases of a collapsing structure. First, denial. "That's not. Whoever did that. It's not what it looks like." I kept my eyes on her, silent. She shifted in her chair, panic creeping into her voice. "We were just talking. He's a therapist. He's been helping me through everything." I tilted my head slightly, like I was curious what lie would come next. It was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to happen. I was confused. Still no reaction from me. Then came the guilt shift. You've been so cold, so distant. I didn't know if you even wanted me back. You don't touch me. You don't ask about my day. I thought maybe you didn't care anymore." Her voice cracked at the end, and for the first time, she looked like she might cry, not from remorse, but from exposure, from losing control. I stood slowly, straightened my jacket, and leaned down just enough for her to hear me clearly over the growing whispers and stares. "You should go," I said, voice calm, flat, deadly. "Everyone here has seen who you are now. There's nothing left for you to salvage." She reached for my hand, and I stepped back like she was poison. She started to speak again, but I was already walking away, across the ballroom, through the double doors, out into the night air. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The show was over, and she was the only one left on stage. She showed up at the house the next morning, eyes puffy, wearing one of those oversized sweaters meant to make her look small, vulnerable, soft. She knocked instead of using her key. A small detail, but telling. A silent admission that she no longer belonged. I opened the door without a word and stepped aside. She walked in like a ghost, clutching her phone like it was a lifeline. Her lips trembling like she'd rehearsed her breakdown in the car and now wasn't sure which version to deliver. "You ambushed me," she said first, voice fragile. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. Do you even know what you've done? I didn't answer. Just stood there and watched her unravel, one button at a time. You could have talked to me. You could have asked. I would have told you the truth. I tilted my head slightly, not in curiosity, but in amusement. She took that as an invitation to shift gears. Fine, she snapped, voice sharpening. Yes. I made a mistake. I was lonely. I felt invisible. I needed to feel like someone still wanted me. Her eyes flickered, searching for some crack in me, some hint of emotion she could grab onto and twist. You weren't there. Not really. You were always somewhere else in your head. I was dying in that silence, and you just let me. I let the silence stretch between us, thick and suffocating. She started pacing, fingers digging into her hair. I gave up everything to come back here. I thought we could fix it. I thought you wanted that too. Her voice cracked again, and this time she let the tears fall. They didn't move me. She tried to reach for my hand, and I stepped back. The rejection hit like a slap. That's when the mask truly cracked. You smothered me, she hissed, teeth clenched. You and your damn perfect routine. Every day the same, like living in a museum curated by a man with no soul. I said nothing. Just watched. You were boring, she spat. You never tried to excite me. Never made me feel alive. You just sat there, waiting for me to behave like a good little wife. This wouldn't have happened if you were a real man. She expected a reaction. A flare of rage. Some sign that her words landed. But I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I only said, then why did you come back? She froze. That one question sliced deeper than any insult. Because the truth was simple. She came back because she thought I'd still be here, waiting to save her from herself. She came back because her other life collapsed, and I was her soft landing. You were supposed to fight for me, she whispered, lower now, almost to herself. You were supposed to show me I was worth it. I stepped closer, my voice low and cold. I wasn't fighting for someone who sold herself for attention. Her face twisted in shock, hurt, fury. How dare you, she began, but I cut her off. You built your excuses like a shield, but they're paper. You weren't lonely. You were greedy. You weren't lost. You were calculated. You didn't cheat because I failed. You cheated because you could. She staggered slightly, like the air had been knocked out of her. You think you're better than me? She snarled, voice rising again. You think this makes you some kind of martyr? I shrugged. No. It just makes me free. That's when the fear set in. Not the loud kind. The quiet, sinking kind. The kind that seeps in when someone realizes they no longer have power. Her eyes darted around the room like she was looking for an escape hatch. Her mouth opened, but nothing came. I can explain, she tried again, softly now, grasping for one last branch. There were things I didn't know how to say. Things I still want to fix. I stared at her, eyes steady, voice flat. There's nothing left to fix. You burned it and danced in the ashes. She sat down hard on the couch, as if her legs had given out. You're really not going to forgive me? She asked, like the idea itself was alien. I leaned in, just enough for her to see the finality in my face. Forgiveness is for mistakes. What you did was a choice. Every time. Her breath caught. She tried to speak, stopped, tried again. What am I supposed to do now? I turned away, walking toward the door she came through. Live with it. She stood, called my name. I didn't stop. Didn't look back. She was crying now, full body sobs, desperate and loud, the kind that would have shattered me once. But now they sounded like wine through dead trees, haunting, hollow, and completely meaningless. The morning after she fell apart in the living room, I began phase 1. No announcements, no threats, no second chances. Just a cold, calculated sequence of steps designed to erase her from the infrastructure of my life and leave her staring at the wreckage of the empire she thought she could manipulate. First, I moved all joint funds into a separate account under my name. Not drained, not panicked, just redistributed with quiet authority, leaving behind enough to avoid suspicion but ensuring she couldn't touch what she didn't earn. I'd already rerouted my paychecks weeks earlier, back when she was too busy lying about yoga sessions to notice the changes in our banking app. Next came the credit cards. I disabled the one she used most often, marked it as lost. The moment she'd try to swipe it for her usual overpriced matcha or boutique therapist, she'd find herself declined, standing there with a fake smile and no explanation. Then the car. I'd paid it off last year, under my name, of course. She insisted she needed it for autonomy, and I let her believe that. The GPS tracker I installed during our reconciliation gave me everything I needed. I waited until I knew it was parked at her friend Jenna's place, then sent a tow company I trusted to reclaim it quietly. She'd step outside expecting freedom and find an empty spot. The look on her face was one I wish I could have bottled. Utilities came next. I transferred every bill back under my name exclusively. Changed passwords. Shut down the joint Amazon account she used for her little secret purchases. She'd open her apps and find herself logged out, locked out, cut off. One after the other. Then the apartment she'd kept on the side, her little independence nest. She didn't know I'd had a copy of the lease agreement emailed to myself when she moved back in. Didn't know I'd befriended the property manager under the guise of being a concerned partner. I called him directly, explained she wouldn't be renewing. Cited infidelity and financial misrepresentation. He didn't ask questions. That place will be gone in 30 days. All that space she wanted gone. I moved onto the social layer. I sent a carefully worded email to her parents, formal, respectful, direct. I attached screenshots. A few photos. Nothing graphic. Just enough to shatter the illusion of the dutiful daughter they believed in. No accusations. Just facts. I thought you deserved to know. That was all it took. Her father replied with a single sentence. You deserved better. Her mother never responded. Then her job. She worked in PR, irony at its finest. I crafted an anonymous message sent from a disposable account, attaching a screenshot of her text with timestamps from company hours. I included a photo of her outside that motel during workdays she claimed to be in meetings. No commentary. Just proof. For your HR department's review, the subject line read. That would take a few days to detonate, but I wasn't in a rush. Meanwhile, I met with my lawyer, already prepped and waiting. Divorce papers were ready. Filed under irreconcilable differences with a detailed appendix of infidelity evidence. Custody wasn't an issue, we had no kids. But asset division was. Fortunately, I'd kept every receipt, every title, every proof of sole ownership. The house, the car, the savings, all mine. She had no claim. She thought our reconciliation meant we were rebuilding. What she didn't know was that I had been dismantling everything she touched, brick by brick, while she smiled and lied in my face. I'd also contacted the wellness studio she claimed to attend. I shared the texts, the location data, the timeline of her absences. They confirmed she hadn't attended a single session in over 2 months. I didn't tell her that. I didn't need to. The next time she tried to show up there and rebuild her healing brand, they'd politely decline her energy. The last piece? Her lover. I'd stayed away from him until now, not because I didn't care, but because he wasn't the point. But now he served a purpose. I sent him an envelope. No return address. Inside, printed copies of her messages to him, each one laced with manipulation, using him as leverage to bounce back into my life, framing him as a temporary distraction. You were a beautiful escape, she wrote. But I need something real again. I made sure to highlight that line. Let him stew in the realization that he wasn't her forever, just a fling she turned to when her real life got too difficult. And while the envelope landed in his mailbox, she was still calling me. Texting. Alternating between begging and lashing out. We can still fix this, followed by, you're destroying me. One moment soft, the next venomous. I read every word, saved every voicemail, replied to none. Her desperation was its own symphony. She still thought she could win me back. She didn't know the game was over. Didn't know the lights were already off and the crowd had gone home. Every step she tried to take forward was met with a wall I'd built in advance. And when she finally realized the walls had no doors, only mirrors, she'd see what she'd become. Alone. Exposed. Powerless. And I'd be gone, living the life she tried to hijack. Only this time, it would be perfect, because she'd no longer be in it. It happened at her sister's engagement party. A sprawling backyard event with string lights hanging from trees, soft jazz drifting through Bluetooth speakers, and catered food laid out on rustic wooden tables like a Pinterest dream brought to life. She had insisted we attend together, that it would be a chance to show her family we were healing. She didn't know I'd already spoken to her sister. Didn't know I'd shown her the screenshots, the timeline, the motel photo. Didn't know that her own blood had stared at the evidence for a long, quiet minute before whispering. She always thought no one was watching. The night was warm, a faint breeze carrying the scent of lavender and grilled salmon. People laughed in tight circles, passed around glasses of sparkling rose, posed for pictures. She wore a pale blue dress that clung to her like a second skin, her smile wide, practiced, glossy. I walked beside her, hand on her lower back, playing the part one last time. Her parents were there. So was Jenna, former best friend turned cautious observer. Her lover wasn't in sight, but that was no surprise. He ghosted her 2 days earlier after receiving the envelope. She didn't mention it, but I'd seen the panic in her missed calls to an unsaved number. I made sure she couldn't find him. Made sure she'd be alone when the curtain fell. It started slowly. A few quiet glances. Her mother brushing past her with a curt nod instead of the usual kiss on the cheek. Her father sipping his drink and walking away mid-sentence. Jenna smiled politely, then turned her back when my wife reached for a hug. The music played on, but something in the atmosphere had shifted, something she couldn't name, but could feel. She clung tighter to my arm. Her laughter got louder. Her compliments more forced. "You look amazing tonight," she told her sister, too brightly, as if overcompensating for something invisible but suffocating. Her sister smiled stiffly, then pulled me aside moments later and thanked me. Quietly. Gratefully. In front of her. My wife blinked as I returned, eyes flicking between us, confusion forming like storm clouds. Then came the video. It was never meant for a screen, but her cousin had a projector set up to show a childhood montage for the bride-to-be. A folder was already loaded onto the laptop, but I had sent a USB earlier that afternoon, labeled simply, Family Memories. He played it first, thinking it was part of the show. What came on wasn't a montage. It was the truth. Text messages, photos, audio clips. My wife's voice whispering filth to someone who wasn't her husband. Location logs. Her parked car outside the motel. Timestamps. Receipts. Silence fell like a guillotine. One by one, heads turned toward her. Her sister's mouth opened, then shut. Her father's jaw tightened. Her mother backed away without a word. Jenna covered her mouth and muttered, "Oh my God." My wife stood frozen, blinking at the screen like it was a dream she couldn't wake from. Then she laughed. A short, sharp bark. "This isn't funny," she said, voice rising. "Who the hell would do this? This isn't real." No one answered. The screen went black. The projector clicked off. The only sound was the wind brushing through the trees and her ragged breath. "It's not what it looks like," she shouted, voice cracking. Her mascara had started to smear. "We were just talking." It wasn't." She turned to me, hand outstretched, eyes wide. Tell them it's not true." I looked at her, expression calm. I steady. Said nothing. Her hand dropped. "You son of a bitch," she hissed under her breath. Then louder, spinning toward her parents, "You don't get to judge me. You all act like you're perfect. Like I'm the only one who's ever made a mistake." Her voice was desperate now. Hysterical. "He smothered me. He made me feel like nothing. I was dying in that house and none of you cared." Her mother turned away. Her sister shook her head. Her father walked past her like she was a stranger on the sidewalk. Jenna said nothing. Just watched. My wife staggered slightly, looking around like she didn't know where she was anymore. She tried to laugh again, but her voice broke mid-breath. "This is insane," she muttered, to no one. Then she looked at me, really looked, and saw what she hadn't expected. Not fury. Not heartbreak. Just indifference. Cold, clean, surgical indifference. The realization hit her harder than any scream ever could. I stood there, hands in my pockets, relaxed, unmoved, while the wreckage she built came crashing down around her. That was what finally broke her. Not the evidence. Not the betrayal laid bare. But me still there, still calm, still watching, and no longer caring. That's when she started to cry. Not soft tears. The kind that shake your whole body, that make breathing feel like drowning. She collapsed to the grass, knees first, then folded in on herself like a dying star. No one moved to comfort her. No one said her name. She sobbed while the party ended around her, while the lights dimmed, while people slowly walked away, avoiding her like she was contagious. I didn't leave. Not yet. I stood a few feet away, watching her crumble in real time, letting her know that I saw everything, that I'd always seen, and that I had nothing left to say. That silence was the end. It was a week after the engagement party disaster when the second confrontation exploded, this time in a crowded restaurant during her cousin's graduation dinner, where she showed up despite knowing everyone already knew. Maybe she thought she could salvage something. Maybe she still believed her voice could overpower the truth if she screamed loud enough. I was already seated when she walked in, dressed like she hadn't slept in days, makeup trying and failing to hide the swelling around her eyes. Her mother stiffened when she entered. Her sister muttered something to her fiancé. Her father didn't even look up from his menu. I didn't say a word. She sat 2 seats away, forcing a smile, pretending she belonged. The moment dragged, thick and electric, the air humming with tension no one wanted to acknowledge. And then she snapped. Mid-toast, her voice sliced through the table like glass, sharp, loud, trembling. So what? No one's going to talk to me now. Conversations died instantly. Her cousin's hand froze halfway through raising a champagne glass. Her mother looked away. You're all just going to sit there like I don't exist, she hissed. I stayed silent, let her unravel. This is ridiculous, she went on, eyes darting from face to face. One mistake and suddenly I'm a monster? One mistake. She turned to me then, eyes lit with fury. Say something. Go on, tell them how perfect you were. Tell them how you were the saint who did everything right while I was suffocating in that house you called a home. I leaned forward slowly, finally meeting her gaze, my voice calm but loud enough for the entire table to hear. You didn't make a mistake. You built a second life behind my back, brick by brick, lie by lie. And you thought I'd just keep carrying the weight while you played innocent in public. She flinched but didn't retreat. You weren't there for me. You don't get to act like a victim now. You don't know what it's like to feel unloved every single day. Her voice cracked, but she powered through. You were cold. Predictable. You stopped being a husband years ago. I stood up slowly. The table went quiet. All eyes locked on us. Her father stood too, but her mother held his arm, whispering something. I took a step toward her, not threatening, just close enough that she had to look up. I was predictable because I was consistent. I was boring because I was stable. I stopped chasing you because I thought you were home. You wanted chaos. You wanted to be worshipped, not loved. So you lit a match in a house full of people and now you're crying because it's burning down. Gasps rippled around the table. Her lips parted, but nothing came. Her cousin's girlfriend slowly pulled out her phone under the table, clearly recording. She didn't even try to stop her. She was too focused on trying to win a fight that was already over. I gave you everything, I said, voice harder now, sharper. My time, my trust, my name. And you took it, spit on it, then blamed me for not shining it enough. You used your pain like a passport to cheat, to lie, to walk into another man's arms while still sleeping in my bed. Her jaw clenched, fist shaking. He loved me, she snapped, her voice rising. He made me feel seen. And just like that, the silence cracked wide open. Her mother let out a short gasp. Her father's hands curled into fists. Someone in the booth behind us whispered, "Oh my God." I tilted my head. Which one? I asked. The one you used for comfort, or the one you used for leverage? She paled. You don't know what you're talking about. I know everything, I cut in. The texts. The motel. The therapy lie. The secret lease. The fake retreats. I know. And so do they. I gestured to the room without even looking around. They've seen the evidence. They've seen what I've seen. You're not fooling anyone anymore. Her voice turned desperate. You ambushed me. You turned everyone against me. That's abuse. She looked around, eyes wild, trying to pull someone into her orbit. Is no one going to say anything? Are you all really okay with this? Her sister stood. You destroyed yourself, she said quietly. He just stopped protecting your lie. Her mother nodded, face like stone. I'm ashamed, she whispered, shaking her head. You let us believe he hurt you, when all along you were the one cutting him open. That did it. She started crying then, not silent tears, but loud, choking sobs, shoulders shaking, mascara running down like war paint. I loved you, she sobbed, reaching toward me. Please, just listen, please. But I didn't move. I didn't speak. I let the silence hang like a noose. She fell to her knees, screaming my name like it would undo everything. 6 months later, she lives in a second-floor apartment above a dying nail salon in a suburb 2 hours from the city she once paraded through like a queen. The woman who used to wear silk robes and speak about vibrational alignment now wears faded hoodies and avoids eye contact with her neighbors. She lost her job 2 weeks after the fundraiser video went viral. HR called it a mutual separation, but everyone knew the brand couldn't survive the association. A PR rep caught cheating in public, with time-stamped receipts and wellness fraud attached? That kind of scandal sticks. Her LinkedIn quietly vanished. Her social media accounts went dark after her own friends turned on her, likes disappeared, comments dried up, followers dipped overnight. Jenna never responded to her texts. Her sister blocked her outright. Even the Instagram-famous yoga instructor she once name-dropped in every conversation unfollowed her the same week the footage made its way to a gossip subreddit. Her lover? He ghosted the moment the illusion shattered. Deleted her number, scrubbed his DMs, moved on to someone younger and less radioactive. She tried contacting him, 3 voicemails, 2 long emails, and 1 humiliating DM under a burner account. No response. All that attention, all those, "You make me feel alive," whispers she weaponized against me. They vanished like smoke when the world stopped clapping. And when the silence got too loud, she did what I always knew she would. She came back. Not literally, not the confident, manipulative version of her. That woman died the moment the screen went black at the engagement party. This version came in pieces. First, a message. I know I don't deserve it, but can we just talk? Then a voice note, soft and shaking. I've been thinking about what we had. You were always the only one who actually saw me. I didn't reply. She followed up a few days later with, I miss you. Not just the life. You. I let that one rot in the inbox too. Then she showed up in person. A rainy Sunday morning, the kind where the sky looks bruised and everything feels just slightly heavier than it should. I opened the door and there she was, hood up, soaked, eyes bloodshot, mascara dripping into the corners like spider legs. Please, she whispered. I just need to say it. I was wrong. I ruined everything. I don't know who I am anymore. She looked thinner. Not graceful thin, hollow. Her voice cracked like glass under pressure. I lied. I cheated. I tore everything apart. But you were the only person who ever stayed solid. You were home. And I set fire to it because I thought the flames made me interesting. She reached out, and I didn't move. She dropped her hand like it burned. I would do anything to fix it. Anything. I don't care how long it takes. I just need you to believe that I'm not that person anymore. I stared at her for a long moment, then stepped out onto the porch, letting the door close behind me. Her eyes lit up. Hope is a dangerous thing in a broken person. I said one sentence. Just one. You're not the woman I married. She opened her mouth, probably to agree, to twist it into a redemption arc. But I wasn't done. And I wouldn't marry the woman you've become. She folded inward, shoulders shaking, hands pressed to her mouth like she could hold the sob in with sheer force. I stepped past her, walked down the steps, and got into my car without another word. She stayed on the porch, alone with the rain and her consequences. I haven't heard from her since. And I never will. Because she finally got what she claimed to want: space. Boundaries. Growth. Only now, no one's clapping for her progress. There's no audience left to cheer. Just the echo of everything she destroyed and the silence of the man who once would have forgiven her anything. But not anymore. Never again. So I ask you, what would you have done if it was your wife?